my hair though. Okay. Hey fellow AP nerds, it's at Madi and at Dayna here for another Q&A on AP Lang topics. Today we're going to be covering argument. Tweet us your questions with the hashtag APSwag. Alright, well, first question we have is, how do I establish a clear position for my English paper? Okay, that's a good question, I think. And personally, what I've found through my numerous experiences with the AP argument style of questions, you need to know your jargon. You read a thing, you gotta use the jargon.
Yeah. Okay, and then another good tip is to just, prior to writing any type of argument, knowing if you're going into the AP exam or if you're just doing practice, is to stay up to date on current events. So you have background knowledge, so you can use tidbits from like current events or history to incorporate into your argument to prove your point further. Question number 2 is, what are good types of evidence to use in an English paper?
It's a great question. Luckily for them, we have an answer. So what you want to use is you want to use toes. Not these toes. Toes stands for types of evidences. Now how do we know which types of evidences to use? Well, we have another answer for you. You want to use the mnemonic device. Lovers of chocolate probably seem pretty happy, because like who wouldn't love chocolate? But the thing is that those things stand for things.
Oh my god. Okay, first one to use is literature, which is any type of already written work. Literature can span from everything from nonfiction to fiction, but be careful when you're using fiction, because just using an example from a fictitious book doesn't give it any context. It doesn't help your argument because it's fiction. It's fake.
So you need to make sure that you buffer it to help people know what you're talking about, what's in the book, and why it relates.
Good. Okay. Number 2 and number 3 kind of go together. If you use them together, it works really well, which is current events and history. Current events is obviously what is in the news currently, what's going on, whatever.
Politically, economically,
things like that. History is, from what I've used in the past, it's everything before 1990. So anything from 1989 to whenever.
200 BC.
World history, American history, whatever. These will help you more than the literature because they are real, they've already happened, people know about them.
And using them together helps you establish a trend. So if you have a trend already happening in history and happening today, then it helps you, prove your point that, look, this has happened before, it's going to happen in the future. So obviously, I've observed this, you've observed this, we've all observed this, so it's a thing, okay? You can't dispute things that have happened.
Yeah, okay. Next one
Pop
is
culture.
Pop culture.
So,
which is basically anything from what we said now, 1990 to present time. So movies, anything going on with celebrities,
social media,
stuff like that.
New games that are out, if it helps your case. Talk about Flappy Bird.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, next one is personal experience. Now this one can be kind of tricky because it is personal experience and no one knows if you're lying or not.
So don't be stupid.
And don't make it sound too informal, just all...
Because you are still writing an essay to be graded by an AP reader for a test that could give you college credit. So
yep. There you go.
Don't be talking about your idiotic Saturday nights where you vandalized school property, because that's probably not a good idea.
Probably not. Okay, and the last one is social observation. So this kind of goes along with the personal experience.
And pop culture a little bit.
Yeah, but it's kind of what you see as maybe an AP student, maybe as whatever you are. However you can establish a position of authority on your topic that goes along with your argument. It can help you, or it can also not help your argument depending on what you're talking about, just like personal experience.
And all of this kind of also can relate back to question number 1, where it was asking about a clear position, because if you're well-rounded and you know about your toes, then that also helps with your position.
Yeah, and it'll make you sound more focused and you'll know what you're talking about. number 3 is, how do I differentiate between argument and persuasion?
Once again, we have an answer. Argument is when you give it. Start with persuasion, shall we? Persuasion is the thing you don't want to do.
So this is a very important point because argument and persuasion are definitely not the same thing, where some people think it is the same thing.
It's not.
But it's not. Okay, starting with persuasion. Persuasion is basically telling someone how to think. It's trying to convince the other person to have the same views. So this, I don't know, this.
Like you can't make a dog person like cats. It's just not how it works.
If you're lucky, but
then there's
probably not going to work as well as you think it will. Argument is gonna work a little bit better because, just like the previous question, you have all of your different evidence points, so you see it work in other places. Argument also is giving the person something else to think about. It's not telling them what to think, it's making them think.
And you don't want to persuade people, you want to argue.
Yeah, it also just makes you sound more educated. Okay. Question number 4, friends, is how do I concede and refute without sounding like I'm contradicting myself?
This is a good question because this happens a lot. Alright, concession refutation means that you're acknowledging the validity of another point, another side of the argument, but you're not saying that they're wrong, because if you say that you're wrong, then you're being rude and you're not...
And that leads to persuading.
Yeah, and you don't want to force your views upon someone, you just want to be like, look, I understand that this is what you view, but here's why my point is better than your position.
Yes. Okay, so what you want to do is you want to explain why your position is valid. Like, out of all of the other things you could argue about, why is yours the best?
And so it helps to pair it with toes, because toes show that you know what you're talking about. And if you can prove to them that this has happened before, or this is the trend, or, you know, this is why this is the right way to think, then they might be like, oh, you know what, I didn't think about that, and maybe you're right.
Yeah, and the point of a good argument is to make people think, not to necessarily change their views, but just to give them something else to think about. Last but not least, question number 5. How do I use wit?
What
in
did
my
you say?
Paper. Okay.
Wit?
This
Wit
is very important to an argument or to any paper that you're writing because it goes along with voice and it just makes your paper sound better if you don't sound like a robot talking about whatever your topic is, especially weird topics like pennies
Or museums.
or museums. You need voice, you need wit. That is what is going to make your paper the best. Like, either be funny or sarcastic, but don't, like, overdo the sarcasm, because...
But also don't underdo it. If you're gonna put sarcasm, you gotta go the whole
You
9
gotta make
yards.
it clear.
You gotta get a 9, you gotta go the 9 yards.
Yeah, you gotta make it clear, but just don't sound like too informal, if that makes sense. You gotta balance everything out.
And also, using wit sometimes can help you bump up from an 8 to a 9 if you have enough voice in your paper.
Yeah, it can just set you over the edge to having a really good paper instead of just a sort of good paper.